The agenda this week considered how a changing climate is changing our diets, focused on the future of journalism, and looked at what last week's election loss means for the Conservatives and NDP. The agenda's Week in Review begins with teacher turmoil. I got to do a Woodward and Bernstein thing here, which is follow the money, right? Isn't that what they said? Follow the money. We're going to follow the money. To your knowledge, Janet Ecker, did the Harris government ever pay teacher unions millions of dollars on the side secretly to help resolve contract disputes?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think, and if there had been something about, okay, let's pay for the hotel rooms or let's pay for, the expenses and whatever, I can't imagine our finance ministers of the day handing the union a check. Just like, here's a check, because we think that's how much, you should have.
Well, apparently they took turns. Apparently one time the union picked up the cost of the hotel, the next time the government did.
Yeah, but I think the problem is that first of all, it's the way it's been done. Secondly, the explanation, the way the government has tried to explain it. On the one hand, they're saying, oh, well, it's because there was a change in the way we do collective bargaining now. On the other hand, they're sitting there saying, oh, no, we've always done this. So I think the whole, and then the minister, unfortunately, her comments about, oh, well, who needs receipts? We all know how much this costs. I mean, it's just the whole way it's been managed, I think, too, even doubles the bad odor that it's left with many, many parents.
Okay, Francis Lincoln, in your time in government, are you aware of any similar payments having been paid to teacher unions in order to get an agreement?
No, I'm not aware of any. If they happened, well, it was a secret to everybody and remains a secret.
But you negotiated, you were a negotiator.
Yes. And I also, on the union side, negotiated for OPSU, and there was not those kinds of payments. There might be some shared expenses from time to time, but nothing like this. However, the government's explanation, I agree with Janet, by the way this is managed has just been terrible. The government's explanation that there has been a major change in the bargaining structure that they've imposed, and that for a transition period, they committed to supporting that cost for both the unions and the boards, because the boards protested too at the time. I remember when that was going on. That is a reasonable explanation, but why, if they ever told us during that round of bargaining or during the change in the bargaining procedures, I missed it completely. So this has, on top of all the other problems that the McGuinty and then Wynne government have had around, backroom deals and secret deals, this has a really negative stain, I think, for the government. And, at this point in time, while it may have been reasonable, I don't think anyone will accept it as being reasonable. And I think it'll go down on the list of things that opposition parties will continue to point to in terms of their failures.
You now get to defend the indefensible, apparently.
Well,
if you want to.
No, in a sense, it's not defensible, because when it's A1 above the fold on in the Toronto Daily Star, people are outraged. Oh my God, you've paid them some of their expenses in a very long negotiating process. The fact is, it's kind of the very loose ends, minor details in completing the contract negotiations. But the way it was done, it doesn't feel good, it doesn't look good, and there's a better way of doing it, particularly now that it's out there that sometimes we do pay expenses. And this happens in settling major legal disputes in court. Who's going to pay the cost? How can we negotiate the cost? The better way to do it would be to say, okay, on these last little details, let's put our expenses before an independent third party, and that independent third party will come up with a number, and it will be transparent, open. But I'm sure when they wrapped up these final details, nobody ever thought, oh my God, the public would be outraged. And the public is outraged, because it's one of those, it's like the coffee and donuts in the e-health thing. People think, oh my God, I didn't know that was going on. It's not a big deal, but it could have been handled in a much better way.
It's a lot more money than coffee and donuts, though.
Well, no, but it's not the substance of the issue was a contract involving billions of dollars, and this just ties up the details. Put it in front of a third party, get the receipts in there so that one can report fully on what happened.
Let me go to Martin on this. An attempt to put it in some perspective. The Education Ministry spends $20 billion a year educating the children of Ontario. We are talking about a few $1 million on a budget of 20+ billion. Does that matter?
Well, and if my daughters were here, they could tell you the precise decimal, 0.001%,
because they're way smarter than you,
or whatever it is. But look, you're right, it's a fraction of that $20 billion budget. I think a 1% increase in teacher salaries is about $150 million. So we're talking a small quantum. I agree, it looks sneaky, it sounds sneaky, but I think we're getting distracted I think it's a great opposition issue. I don't say that ironically. I think it's a fair point to raise, the secrecy. It looks terrible, I agree as well, politically. But it happens all the time. Not all the time, but often in union negotiations.
It doesn't happen if you're a private sector company trying to bid on government contracts, and it says in the contracts from the government, you are on the hook for your own expenditures related to these things. We're not buying your lunches, we're not paying for your hotel bills, et cetera, et cetera. So how come the government takes that approach with private sector companies, but apparently it's willing to give unions millions of dollars to pay their bills?
Greg talked about the Toronto Daily Star. We dropped the Daily a while ago.
Not in my world.
But bless you. The boards also got money. So it's not just the unions. I think the public has lost sight of that. The boards have gotten millions of dollars as well. So I think the total is about $4 million when you factor that in as well. So this was a very complicated process, and Janet is right. They didn't do it under the Tories, but they also had a very messy bargaining process that left us with weeks of strikes. So their tactic has changed, the process has changed.
And this has all been settled so nicely.
Well, we haven't had a long strike. We've had
we've had disruption, which can sometimes actually be worse for the kids in terms of report cards and extracurricular, as you said, right? So there's still problems in the classroom.
Great.
The other thing to remember is the actual costs of these negotiations. It goes way beyond $2 or $3 million in lawyers' fees, in analysts' fees, in all of the things that bring parties together, and the sort of transactional costs. The difficulty with this relatively minor issue is that the major issue is that kids' education is being compromised, and we have, after 16 months, we have no agreement. So let us not get our attention diverted from the fact that the provincial government and EDFO and CUPE and part of OSSTF need to come to an agreement. That's the public good.
If climate change was only change in temperature, and if every year we got average temperature, which we obviously never get, you'd expect that there'd be opportunities in Canada. I mean, of course, there's limits with the amount of land further north and what have you. But the reality is that we get variations from year to year, particularly in moisture. And your previous guest noted the importance of moisture. And if we look at what's actually happening in areas that are experiencing climate change already, California is a classic case. It's got more heat. It's not good for agriculture there. They're in big trouble. Series of droughts.
Because no moisture.
There's no moisture. Australia the same. And the prairies is similar. The constraint on agriculture in the prairies will be moisture. And the idea of, well, we can irrigate, that's a false assumption, because all of the waters are currently allocated. There's no more water available, and there'll be less actually coming down from the Rockies, because the glaciers, once they've melted away even further than they already have, will be generating less water for use in the prairies. So the big cruncher for prairie agriculture is going to be lack of moisture.
So disabuse ourselves of the notion that warmer necessarily means better.
Exactly. And similarly, the comparison between West and East. There was the president of the Ontario Corn Producers Association in Ontario was a climate skeptic for a long while. And he actually read the 3 volumes of the IPCC reports, and he gave a public address, and I went along.
We're tough on acronyms here. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It summarizes all of the science in the world. He read them. It must have taken him months. Anyway, he gave a public address, and I went along to this, and I thought he was going to say, it's all nonsense. He said, if you are a young person in Ontario thinking of going into farming, don't do it unless you can guarantee your water supply for the next 50 years. So even in Ontario, someone in the business, a farmer, says be careful about the availability of moisture.
We always think about adapting to climate change, but we forget that agriculture itself is a major contributor to climate change. It's estimated that 1/3 of our global warming is due to agriculture itself, and it's essentially 3 different things. First, when we expand agricultural lands, this is mainly happening in the tropics, mainly in Indonesia, Malaysia, Brazil, and so on. As we expand agriculture in those places, we are cutting down forests, and when we do that, we release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is a greenhouse gas causing climate change. The other two major impacts of climate change, impacts of agriculture on climate, is through increases in methane emissions. Methane is another major greenhouse gas. It's actually a more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And we get methane through livestock production and through rice paddy cultivation. It's estimated that about half of all the methane that we put into the atmosphere comes from agriculture. And the last thing is nitrous oxide, which is an even more powerful greenhouse gas. And when we apply fertilizers on the land, crops get bigger, but not all of the nitrogen or phosphorus that we put on the land is actually taken up by the crops. So the excess nitrogen that remains on the soil, a bunch of that gets oxidized and becomes nitrous oxide, a powerful greenhouse gas. And it's estimated that 3/4 of the nitrous oxide that we are emitting into the atmosphere comes from our fertilizer application. So, yes, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, just in conclusion here then, can you tell us how much is happening in terms of reforms around the world to cut down on the deforesting, to reduce the amount of methane that's going into the atmosphere, and reduce the amount of nitrous oxide that's going into the atmosphere, thereby reducing the contribution that agriculture is making to climate change in the world?
Yeah. At the last Copenhagen summit, there was a huge presence from the agricultural community because they sort of realized that agriculture is a major player in climate change and should take a major role in terms of sort of reducing human impact on climate. And I hope that will continue. As you know, as some people may know, the one major thing that countries agreed upon at the last Copenhagen climate summit was to reduce the amount of deforestation happening around the planet. There is a term for it. It's called REDD, reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation. Countries have agreed to put in money and promote projects in order to reduce deforestation rates and reduce the carbon dioxide concentration. Not as much in terms of government policies to reduce methane and nitrous oxide emissions. I mean, people are doing research to figure out whether you can feed animals a different diet and reduce methane emissions, whether you can change the way you manage fertilizers in order to reduce nitrous oxide emissions. I mean, the answer is in some ways fairly simple. We apply way too much fertilizer in many places around the world, including North America and Europe.
If, though, Mark, we were going to change our diets so that we cared less about fast, get it into me, get out of there, less about the obsession with taste, more about how to cook your own foods, more about how to eat an environmentally sensible diet, would it look a lot different than what we do right now?
It would look a lot different in that, right now you go to a restaurant, and how many times do you walk in, you sit down, you say, I'm going to have a steak. What size of steak do you order? Because most of the time it's 12 to 16 ounces.
Right.
You don't need that much. Right? The average person can eat between 100 and 300 grams of protein at a meal, but you could even get away with only 50. So if you sat down and you got a salad that had 3 pieces of sliced steak on top of it, would you feel that you got value for your money? And this is part of the issue.
But I probably think that's healthier for me.
It is healthier for you. If you start filling your plate with more greens and with more vegetables and with things that have more nutrition for you, you'll have a healthier diet. And if you start cutting down on the protein you're eating, you're actually be cutting some of that protein that we're forcing our farmers to produce tons of, which is creating the greenhouse gases.
Sarah, let's just finish up. I'm going to finish up right there, actually, Mark. It's a nice segue, which is, as you look forward and the impact climate change will have on what we can grow and therefore what we eat, what comes to mind?
Oh, well, it depends if I'm feeling optimistic or pessimistic, but I'm going for optimism today. Okay. So I'm envisioning a future where we have a consumer culture, or rather a food culture that isn't a consumer culture, a food culture that values other things, that values the ethics of food, that values how the food was raised, how...
That's all wrapped up in climate change?
That was all wrapped up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Climate change is very connected to, well, climate change is the push factor. Why do we need to care about this now? Why do every single one of us have to start thinking about how our food is produced and choosing food that is better? Because of climate change. It's our opportunity. Each of us can do something every day for climate change.
Because agriculture contributes significantly to climate change, as we've just heard earlier in the program. Do you want to take the last word on that?
I think that it contributes to climate change, and one of the things that we're trying to do is we're developing the chefs of the future at George Brown. And so we've actually written sustainability into our course lectures. We've actually built nutrition into the course lectures, so every recipe now has nutrition on it, nutrition labels, so our students can understand it. And we teach them how to replace foods. So instead of having a huge steak on the plate, how can we replace that with some grains or with lentils? Or how can we replace it with something with higher protein content that doesn't necessarily have to be beef all the time?
This is what actually makes the story interesting, was that they perceived themselves to be above the law, because in reality and practice, they were. And the thing that makes the story interesting is that it isn't just that the journalists were breaking the law, but that at a certain point, the police, famous Scotland Yard, became aware of it, gathered an enormous amount of very detailed evidence of it, and then decided not to pursue it.
How come?
Because it's about power. So Rupert Murdoch's power in the UK is really very great. He runs 4 national newspapers and a national news channel. And he's always thrown his weight around in the corridors of power. He also has a very particular kind of power, which is to do with fear. That it's odd, actually. Ordinary people aren't frightened of Rupert Murdoch. It's the people in the power elite who are, because they've all seen other members of the power elite having their sex life exposed by Murdoch's newspapers, which is a painful and humiliating experience. And so they've all learned to back off and try and placate him. And so I don't think anybody had to say to the police, hey, don't investigate this, it might cause you trouble. They understood that it was better not to get into a fight.
I think the term you used is monstering.
Yeah, that's that's the term that the tabloids use to describe their own attacks on people. And it can be, you know, a fierce, frightening, deeply painful experience to be monstered.
Claire Short, politician, on the receiving end of a monstering.
Yeah, she was a Labour politician who was a feminist and who objected to the fact that Murdoch's newspapers were routinely publishing pictures of naked women. So she stood up and she said that's a bad idea and tried to get a bit of a campaign going. And they went after her in a horrible way. I mean, they tried to run a story saying that she'd had an affair with a gangster, which she hadn't. They tried to get pictures they'd heard of her posing in a negligee just to embarrass her. They ran a campaign asking their readers whether they would prefer to wake up to Claire Short's face or the back of a bus. I mean, just horrible, humiliating stuff. They were sending topless women round to her house. You know, it's like a campaign of hatred to punish you for standing up.
I gather when you first were tipped off about this phone hacking scandal and all of the other terrible things that News of the World was doing, this Murdoch paper, you thought, okay, it's okay, but it's not a great story. What made you pursue it?
It is what we just referred to, that it very quickly becomes a story about power. And one particular thing was that the guy who'd been editing the News of the World when they were systematically breaking the law had left to become the right-hand man of David Cameron, who was then the leader of the Conservative Party, but very obviously in line to become the next Prime Minister. And then this guy, Andy Coulson, the former editor of the News of the World, was going to be in charge of communicating between our government and our people. And if the story which I was pursuing was correct, that meant that Andy Coulson had always been lying about the scale of crime in his newspaper. And the last place you want a liar is linking the government to the people of the country. So that seemed really, really wrong. And there was also a secondary fear there. What would happen if Andy Coulson got into power? There he is, the Prime Minister's right-hand man. If he began to suspect that a politician close to Cameron was leaking secrets to a journalist, would he hire private investigators to get inside their communications?
As he did for the paper.
As he had done for the paper. So that was a secondary reason for trying to stop that guy's progress.
As you wrote about this story and got it out there into the ether, what kind of feedback did you get?
We did the first big story back in July 2009. And we ran into aggression. So first of all, the Assistant Commissioner of Scotland Yard stepped out in front of the headquarters there and told a big press conference, essentially, that I and The Guardian had got it wrong and the News of the World hadn't done anything seriously wrong. And that was a deeply, deeply misleading statement to make, and they were sitting on evidence that what we were saying was true. Okay, and then the Murdoch company in the UK put out a statement which accused us of deliberately misleading the British people. So this then became a war of words. We were chugging away trying to get the story out and being quite heavily assaulted. I mean, only verbally, I don't mean physically. And it reached a point like where that assistant commissioner got the most aggressive law firm in London to start suing us. And I wasn't the only person trying to uncover the scandal. There was a couple of members of Parliament, one of them, Tom Watson, who's just become the deputy leader of the Labour Party. We discovered that the Murdoch company hired a private investigator who specialises in covert surveillance to follow Tom Watson and secretly video him because they thought he was having an affair so that they could expose and humiliate him. And you know, there was some...
he wasn't.
He wasn't having an affair. No, you're quite right to ask me that. And there were some public figures who discovered that they had been hacked and who started to sue. And this was very threatening to the Murdoch company because the court was going to order the police to disclose the evidence that they were concealing. So in the same way, they hired the same private investigator to follow the two lawyers who were representing those hacking victims, to try and catch them out having sex with somebody they weren't supposed to discredit them and humiliate them. So there was some dirty games going on.
Here's an excerpt from the book. By November 2009, I had spent 4 months since The Guardian's original story about crime at News of the World, trying to break through Murdoch's defenses. But News International, Scotland Yard, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Press Complaints Commission had all stepped forward like well-drilled guardsmen and told the world that we were wrong. I kept trying, but the truth is that a lot of the shots I fired missed their targets or simply bounced harmlessly off the barricades. What was the turning point? When did the shots really start to hit?
Well, I think we started to make slow progress, and they were on the defensive, and they were very frightened. But you may know there was this breakthrough moment after 2 years where we discovered that among the other victims of this phone hacking was a 12-year-old schoolgirl called Millie Dowler, who some 9 years earlier had been abducted and murdered. And that was the tipping point where, I mean, I think the dam was about to burst, but that story had an emotional impact.
The people had followed that for a long time.
Yeah.
And they felt awful for this family.
Yes, and the key thing was that while we were doing these stories in The Guardian, other newspapers were refusing to follow the story, even though it really was quite big because it led straight to David Cameron's office. And that story, the Millie Dowler story, was so powerful that finally the other newspapers had to stop pretending that this wasn't happening. Just to explain, the other newspapers wouldn't join in, partly because some of them were owned by Rupert Murdoch, some of them had been committing the same crimes, and a few of them, even if they didn't have the Murdoch and the crime factor, were supporters of the Conservative Party and didn't want to do stories that embarrassed them. But the story about the missing schoolgirl pulled in those other newspapers, and then it appears to me they knew interesting stuff which they had been suppressing, because the next day, one of those newspapers, the Daily Telegraph, revealed that after the bombings in the London Underground system in July 2005, the News of the World had hacked the voicemail messages of the families of those who had been murdered and mutilated. And that is just as shocking and horrifying as Millie Dowler. And the following day, the same Daily Telegraph reported that the families of British soldiers who'd been killed in Afghanistan had their phones hacked. And you've got this chain reaction of emotional impact now. The whole thing is going to explode. But also what was kind of weird looking back was that the Telegraph was able to produce those stories so quickly that I was tempted to believe they'd always had that information and had been sitting on it. But anyway, it was hugely powerful, that chain reaction.
What ultimately brought down the Conservative government?
Their own hubris and arrogance, I suppose. You know, they didn't run a very good campaign, but in a way, I think the result was kind of baked in from the start. If you looked at the polling data consistently for months before the election, the Conservatives were at 30%, plus or minus 2 points, let's say, with very little upside. Only 5% of people would put them as their second choice. So it was hard to see how they were ever going to win this election from the start. The stars would have to line up for them perfectly, where they'd get 35%, the other two parties would get 33%, if that even adds up. And then that had to do with everything they were doing well in government. But then, yes, you get into the campaign, and they had no real platform. There was no real raison d'etre. There was no reason why you had to give them another mandate. It was just kind of more of the same. And of course, the stars did not line up for them as the way they'd hoped. The Liberals swamped the NDP, and at that point, it was definitely over.
Dianne Findlay, who's got a seat in southwestern Ontario, wants to be the new interim leader of the party, was on TV in the days after the election saying, people liked our policies, so that wasn't it. And I wonder whether that's code for, it's all Harper's fault.
It is, except depending what you mean. So yes, I don't think it was about the economy. People don't typically throw out, Canadians don't typically throw out majority governments unless we're really in a bad recession, and this is, whatever you think, is not that. I don't think it was to do with just the campaign, as I say. I don't think it was to do with Harper if what that means is, oh, he wasn't likable enough, because he was never terribly likable, and they were winning elections in the past. I think it did have to do, however, with the culture that was established at senior levels of the party, and the top person obviously sets the tone and sets the culture. And it was, as I say, one of overbearing, secretive, not particularly open with the public.
But that's not a party thing, that's a him thing, isn't it?
It's a him thing, but it became a party thing in terms of that was the culture at the senior levels. It wasn't just, I mean, we saw this, for example, during the Mike Duffy trial, all those emails. The sort of habitual deception and cover-up was part of it. The unwillingness to level with the public, the bullying of subordinates, just the whole culture was very nasty and opportunistic and cynical, and eventually people got very, very tired of it.
Now, having said that, this is not 1993 where the Conservatives end up with 2 seats. You know, for repudiation, they've still got 99 seats. They got almost a third of the vote. And, you know, they're the official opposition. They're not the 3rd or 4th place party. We've seen that happen before as well. So, I mean, you got to give them some brownie points, right? They did do some stuff well.
Well, that's right. I mean, I suppose it depends what you measure it against. I mean, it's same as there were some people talking about this was a liberal landslide. No, it wasn't. They won 39.5% of the vote, but they came from nowhere. The Tories, people thought in 2011, had set themselves up for a very long run. They had created this, what looked like a very durable coalition. As you say, it didn't collapse, but it did erode. But they'd set up this coalition of the West and Ontario, kind of a basic small C Conservative coalition. And it was entirely needless that they should go down to defeat. All of that was self-inflicted. All of that was this accretion of just annoyances that the public got tired of. But you're absolutely right. We're in a, for the country's sake, we're in a very good position where we've got contestable politics in most of the country, Atlantic Canada aside. But you know, Quebec, Ontario, BC, Manitoba, these are all very closely contested with 3 different parties all having good shots at seats. That's good news for the country, and as you say, it gives the Conservatives a base to build from.
And they're still powerhouse in Saskatchewan, Alberta, good shape in British Columbia. I mean, they've still got something to build from.
That's right. So then, as you say, 33 seats crucially in Ontario, so they didn't completely give up all of the work of the previous 10, 15 years of trying to make inroads in Ontario. So we're not back to 1993. You're absolutely right.
It's astonishing, however, if you look at the capital city of the province of Ontario, which I'm sorry to tell you, because you're from Winnipeg, this is where elections are won or lost, I'm afraid. It's in the Greater Toronto Area. But if you look at the 416, there's not a single Conservative seat, federally or provincially. Yeah. This is a wasteland for Conservatives right now.
And much more concerning for them, of course, is not so much 416, where they've struggled for a long time. It's 905, where they were making big inroads last time. And of course, that has a lot to do with the sort of upwardly mobile immigrant vote. The immigrant vote had not been one that Conservatives historically had done very well with. For the longest time, they were locked up by the Liberals. They had invested great effort and attention in trying to make inroads in there. I think they're still in play. I don't think the immigrant vote has just gone back to the Liberals now en masse. But it does show that it matters how you approach them. I think a message that is rooted in entrepreneurship, hard work, low taxes, I think, you know, Conservatives like to say that immigrant values are their values, and I think in that case it's true. I think we've seen when you get into the more divisive cultural stuff, gay marriage did not work for the Conservatives when they thought it would, and certainly the whole niqab issue, I think, cost them a great deal.
How much soul searching do you think is really going on in the party right now? Because I know after the last Ontario election campaign, where the NDP similarly made a move towards the middle, there was an intense amount of internal finger pointing, question raising, you know, the whole 9 yards. How much of that is going on in the federal NDP right now?
I get the impression that everyone is shell-shocked. Again, I think it is because, you know, they're moving out of their offices. They've lost, you know, people like Megan Leslie and Peggy Nash, real party stars. That I think everyone is just trying to mentally wrap their head around what has happened. And I think that examination certainly is going to happen behind the scenes. What's interesting, again, is that Tom Mulcair really hasn't come out in public and spoken publicly. And I think there's going to be increased pressure. I don't know what the plan is. You know, he's obviously flying under the radar, and they have to get their message down. But certainly, I think that you know, they're going to have to face some honest questions about what happened, how they handled things, how the leader performed, you know, and I don't think that they can just blame it on, okay, well, you know, there was a wave, and the Liberal Party obviously garnered a lot of momentum going into the election, and, you know, the Liberals just happened to win. You know, I think they're going to have a real examination of, you know, what they could have done differently. Because again, going back to that point about Tom Mulcair was the front runner. This is a little bit different than the party that was never taken seriously. And, you know, kind of people joke about the fact that the NDP is used to being maybe the bridesmaid in Canadian politics. Again, this is different. This was supposed to be their shot. Tom Mulcair was supposed to be their ticket to the promised land. And, you know, that really, really didn't happen. So they're going to have to face those questions, difficult questions, and figure out a way forward.
And that is our Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety. They're on our website at tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Agenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.